"She needs a transfusion. She won't stop bleeding. Get me more blood." I could hear the nurses screaming as I was convulsing from my second seizure. I was shaking uncontrollably, and the doctors and nurses were all around me holding me down to stop me from falling off the hospital bed. There were bright white lights flashing in front of my eyes in all directions. I couldn't stop. I couldn't speak. I couldn't see. And then a nurse injected me with something, and I passed out. "Aw, you have nothing to worry about," the dentist reassured me and my mom. "This is a very normal procedure, and many people that have had your condition have had their wisdom teeth removed with absolutely no problems." I know you've seen her medical reports, but I just want to be clear. When she was born, she had a hole in her heart that required multiple surgeries to fix. This led to her getting a clotting disorder at 8, and she's had to take blood thinners ever since. Yes, I see that in the file. There's no risk at all. She'll be fine. We will take care of her. After my mom discussed all the risks with him, he continued to reassure us that it was going to be okay. Thank God, because my wisdom teeth had been hurting for weeks, and we couldn't get any surgeon to take us as they said that it would lead to complications. We were just about to give up, actually, before we met him, but he reassured us again and again that we had nothing to worry about, so we took his word for it. After I had my surgery, I took my pain meds as needed, rested well, and I went to school on Monday. The Tuesday after surgery, I was sitting in class taking notes. It was a kinda cold day, so I took my white blanket with me. And as I was writing notes and listening to my teacher speak, I felt like I was drooling, so I brought the blanket to my mouth. I didn't think anything of it, as the dentist told me drooling was a normal side effect for a few days. But when I brought it down from my mouth, my stomach dropped, as I noticed it wasn't drool at all. It was blood. I dropped everything I was doing and I ran to the bathroom. I put my head over the sink and I started pulling out a bunch of paper towels out. Blood was dripping out of my mouth into the sink. I reached for my phone in my pocket, but I realized that I left it in the classroom. So I stuffed my mouth with some towels and I ran back to the classroom to grab my phone. And I ran back to the bathroom. By the time I got back, the paper towels were already filled with blood, so I already had to replace the towels in my mouth. I realized then that I was going to need help. So I went back to the classroom and I called my teacher to come to the bathroom to help me. Startled after seeing my tissues already filled with blood and dripping down my chin, she dropped everything she was doing and she came out to help me. I gave her my phone. "Please call my dad to come get me." She grabbed my phone and typed in dad and pressed call. My dad immediately rushed out. He was able to turn a 30-minute drive into 10. He rushed me to urgent care and we got treated right away. They took me to a room and the nurses and doctors were running around trying to help stop the bleeding. One was holding down the gauze in my mouth while the other was running out to get more. They realized that they had to rush me to the ER as soon as possible. So they quickly called an ambulance to take me there. I laid there in the bed in the ambulance, just watching them stuff my mouth with tissues and gauze, and then removing it dripping with blood just to replace it with more. It felt like an eternity before we got to the ER. When we finally got to the ER, I was taken to a room, and I had so many doctors and nurses surrounding me trying to help me. I also have claustrophobia, but with everything that was going on with all the gauze and blood, and I just wasn't able to say anything to ask for my space. That added more to the panic attack I was already having, and not long after that, I had my first seizure of the day. Within the 12 hours I was there, I had a total of 2 seizures and a mini heart attack to top it off. I had to be sent to another hospital, so they called another ambulance and I was transported for the second time. Every time I was in the ambulance, it was like torture. The movement from the bed to the ambulance bed, the waves of panic and fear spiking in the ambulance, and then the movement from the ambulance to the next hospital. By the time I got there, I was so cold from all the blood loss, I was shivering. They took me to a room and the doctors brought out like 6 heating lamps for me. And in all honesty, that was the highlight of the night. I still had a lot of doctors and nurses constantly surrounding me, sticking me with IVs, taking my temperature every 20 minutes, and making sure I was warm enough. After almost 2 hours of being there, I was taken back for emergency surgery to stop the bleeding. They cauterized the wound, and in the process, they found 10 large bone fragments in just that socket alone. I had to stay in the ICU for 5 days afterwards. I was only able to have soft foods and a liquid diet. I had lost half of my blood count and I needed a blood transfusion with 2 units of blood. After the whole ordeal, when I would see blood go into my arm, I felt nauseous. Because of how much pain I was in, I completely forgot that I had an allergy to morphine that makes me nauseous. I couldn't take it anymore, and I just started crying uncontrollably until I fell asleep. I woke up 30 hours later. When I woke up, I saw my dad and my boyfriend Rob sitting next to me. My dad brought me a shake, and Rob brought me his laptop and some snacks for us. After a while, my dad went to sleep, and Rob and I stayed up watching Netflix and talking. At one point, he squeezed my hand, looked me in the eyes, and said, "I love you, baby. I'm glad you're okay." I smiled at him and he kissed me on the forehead. After a while, we decided to go to bed. After the 5th day, I was finally able to go home. I was excited. I was always saying how ready I was to be home, in my own bed with my dogs. Because to be honest with you, there were many moments on that traumatic day that I thought I'd never see any of it again. But you know, for some reason, no matter how much I expressed how excited I was, I never really could feel the excitement I wanted to feel and I thought I should be feeling. It's kind of hard to explain, I guess. I suffered so much trauma on that day that it took me a lot more to recover than just my wounds healing. First, when I got home, I was so cold that no amount of blankets and hot bath could warm me up. But then after that, I developed an unhealthy attachment to my blanket and I carried it around everywhere, even to school. It gave me a sense of security. I felt like it protected me. So my parents thought it was best to send me to therapy after they saw how attached I was to it, and because of all the trauma I went through. Over the summer, I continued going to therapy, but I still didn't spend any of my time with my friends or anyone. I would isolate myself in my room for days on end, and only left to go to the bathroom and take my medication. I had nightmares for weeks. Some would be of me in the hospital room with the oral surgeon cackling, and others would be me in the bathroom bleeding. I couldn't get myself to eat. I was so scared that the food would knock something loose in some way, and I would start the bleeding all over again. I lost almost 10 pounds out of fear of eating, and just being completely deprived of motivation. Months passed, and I was still carrying around my blanket despite being in therapy. But one day, it just hit me. I was almost 20 years old, and I was still carrying around a blanket. I felt so ashamed that after 3 months, I had made 0 progress towards my mental health by still carrying around my blanket. I knew then that something had to change. So I continued going to therapy, and after a long and difficult process, I was slowly able to go a few days on end without the blanket. When school started in August, I went without my blanket and I started to feel more like myself again. I was still quieter than my typical self, but I was talking more and more to my friends. Things proceeded to get better. My mental and physical health were improving slowly but surely. I also began eating more, but I still don't eat as much as I used to. I do feel a lot better, but I suffer from really bad PTSD and a crippling fear of dentists. Life is better now. My family is still very supportive of me and continue to help me overcome my fears. But I know I am on the right path to getting better, and I will eventually get there.